The Range Rover Velar, believe it or not, has been with us for quite some time now, which means that it is due for a facelift. And believe it or not, the car you're looking at right now is the facelift. The devil is in the details, however, because all the little features on this car have been reworked to make it look a little bit more modern, to keep it going for a little while longer, while still remaining to be arguably one of the best looking Range Rovers currently available. In this review, we're going to take a look at all of those changes and tell you whether or not the Velar still has to be on the top of your list if you're buying within this segment, or if time has been unkind and it's time to look away. My name is Ayman Abdullah, this is Malaysian Motoring, this is our review of the 2024 Range Rover Velar. Now, the Range Rover Velar is available in Malaysia in three guises, which are, I believe, L, M and H, with H being the highest model, and that's the one we have here. Now, in terms of the facelift, there are very subtle changes to the design. This grille, for example, has been re-profiled and now has these sort of squircles all the way around to make the car look a little bit wider and a little bit more modern, in keeping with the latest generation Range Rover. These headlights have also been reprofiled with a slightly different LED light or daytime running light design, again to make the car look a little bit fresher and again in line with the new Range Rover and Range Rover Sport. You still get the scrolling indicators, but they have their own little branch up here. You still get the LED fog lights down here, and the bumper itself has also been reprofiled ever so slightly, but the changes are very much blink and you'll miss it. Now, it is worth noting that this particular model comes with what Land Rover calls the black pack, which is why the grille is done up in black, the Range Rover script is done up in black, and all the little details around the car are done up in black to make this car look a little bit stealthier, and also because it contrasts really well against this beautiful pearl white. Now, as I mentioned, with the black pack, all the detailing on this car is done up in black, including this panel here, as well as the wing mirror caps, and there's more black down there to reduce the visual mass of the vehicle. Not that the Velar struggles with that very much. Now, what I appreciate about this car being in white is that it really does outline this car's floating roof. And because the Velar has a relatively dramatic looking roofline, a very distinctive side profile, I think it does really set this car off quite a bit. Now, rolling stock on this particular model is handled by 22-inch alloy wheels wrapped in Pirelli Scorpion Zero tires, which are designed specifically for the Velar, which means they offer fantastic performance on the road. They are relatively quiet and provide a good amount of grip, as we'll explain a little bit later in the drive portion. But for the most part, the side of this car remains relatively unchanged. You still have the flush door handles, which debuted with the Velar, believe it or not, but are now available on other Range Rover models. And you still have this relatively oversized fuel filler cap. I only mention this because it is abnormally large, but Land Rover has explained that the reason for that is because when you buy this car as a diesel in other markets, you need to have a little filler cap for the AdBlue, which I know seems very foreign to Malaysian consumers. It seems very foreign to me too, but you know, global cars. Now, the rear end again is also a set of blink and you'll miss it changes. So the LED taillight design has been changed ever so slightly, so it now just makes a single U rather than the double U's. The scrolling indicator again is sort of over there, and actually within the headlights you'll find these sort of little pinhole design elements which I think look quite nice. And as part of the black pack, again the Range Rover script has been done in black, so has the model designation, and you get even more black down here again to reduce the visual mass. But it is worth noting that with this facelift, Range Rover or Land Rover appears to have deleted the visible rear exhaust exits, which are a bit unfortunate because surprisingly the Velar sounds quite good. Now, behind this rear hatch you will find a pretty good amount of space. The Velar, despite its size, is a strict 5-seater. No, you cannot get this as a 7-seater no matter how hard you try, and as such you benefit from a huge amount of space back here. If I pull back this tonneau cover, which is surprisingly recalcitrant today, there we go. You will find that there is plenty of room in here for all the luggage you can ever think of. There are 4 hooks should you need to hang stuff up. There's a 12-volt socket should you need it. There is also a space-saver spare wheel under here, which I think would be very useful given the fact this car does have some pretty good off-road chops. And you can fold these seats flat should you want to. And because they're spring-loaded, they fold all the way flat. Now, if you ask me, this makes the Range Rover Velar a very convincing family car. The only question is, what family will be able to handle that interior? Now, I say that because with a family car, you would like to be able to access all of your features very easily, which the older Velar was able to do because you used to have a panel here and some buttons and stuff, but all of that is now gone. Because what they've done in here is reduce everything to the very bare minimum in order to achieve a very minimalist interior design. So this screen has now been upgraded to a curved touchscreen display which runs Land Rover's award-winning PIV Pro system. Now the benefit of this is everything responds very quickly, there's a very good processor in here, and everything happens as you're putting in inputs, which is very nice. This is obviously a necessity because now all your HVAC controls are also handled in here, although mercifully there are these little bars on either side of the screen where all of these features are available to you at all times, so at least you're not digging through menus and stuff like that. Now, of course, this comes with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which takes up almost the entirety of the screen, except for those bars on the left and right, as I mentioned earlier, and it does display pretty well. Even when you're using wireless Android Auto, the response is pretty good. Although, of course, you can wire it in, as I have here, to a USB port in here. I'll get on the USB ports in a second. Now, by removing the screen here, it does mean that your drive mode selector has also been relegated to the screen, which means that the action of changing the drive modes is no longer as satisfying as it used to be with those nice sort of toggle switches. However, you do benefit from a little bit more space here, where you have a USB-C port as well as a wireless charger down here, and the center console has also been reduced to the bare minimum. You get a couple of very large cup holders here, you get a very large center console here where obviously your USB ports are, but the strange thing is that while most of the USB ports in this car are USB-C, the one that connects your phone is a USB-A. Which means while the connection is pretty solid, it doesn't charge my phone fast enough. Small matter. Now, if you don't like this screen, you have another one in front of you, which again runs an upgraded version of the PIV Pro system, which means the graphics are very good, it's very responsive, refresh rate is great, and everything is nice and crisp. And the same can be said of the full color heads-up display, which gives you things like your ADAS system readouts, your traffic sign recognition, your cruise control, and so on and so forth, as well as your navigation system. So you have turn-by-turn directions in that screen, which is always very nice. Now, that screen and this screen is manipulated by the buttons here on the steering wheel, which are capacitive touch, but then you have to click them in, which I think is kind of alright, because at least it does mean that when I put in inputs there is a tactile response to it, but it does mean that when you're driving you kind of have to look where you're placing your buttons. Mercifully, however, these standard fit paddle shifters are very nice and they are metal, and the switches back here all feel very nice, and you still mercifully have switches here for like your windows and your memory settings and so on. Now, in terms of comfort and ergonomics, aside from this, which if I'm set up properly, this falls very easily to hand. This is an electrically adjustable steering wheel, so again, you can get it exactly where you want it to be. These seats are memory and powered, as well as heated, ventilated with massage function on the two front seats, which is excellent. Perhaps the best massage seats I've ever seen in any car I've ever reviewed. And of course, when you're driving, you want to enjoy your entertainment, there is a standard fit Meridian audio system in this car, which is absolutely top-notch. The back of the Range Rover Velar is pretty good too, because with this seat setup in my driving position, as you can see, I have a very good amount of knee room and a pretty decent amount of headroom, again, despite that dramatic roofline. And of course, goodies back here are aided by things like more climate control systems back here, so I can adjust two different zones on either side. I can even adjust my fan speed as well as the direction of air, although it is unfortunate that the only vents back here are in the middle. In terms of comfort, like I said, I have very good knee room, but more importantly, I have very good under-thigh support. So when I stretch my feet out in front of me, I get all the support I need, which would be great if I'm stuck in here to do a long journey. And if I wanted to adjust my recline angle, it's not via a lever. Instead, it is powered with buttons here which allow me to adjust the backrest angle to something a little bit more upright, like this, should I so want to. And of course, if I want to snooze or take a nap, I just put it the other way. And of course, if I want even more comfort, I can lower the rear center armrest, where I have a couple of relatively shallow cup holders, as well as a couple of USB-C ports back here. And of course, there is another 12-volt socket here for charging up devices and so on. If you're trying to fit a rear-facing child seat, you will appreciate the fact the doors in this car open a decent size, and more importantly, because the front seats are relatively thin, it does mean that a rear-facing child seat does have enough space without having to adjust your seating position. The ISOFIX mounts are accessible via these sort of detachable covers, which means chances are if you're buying one of these secondhand, these covers would have gone missing. But more importantly, when you're sat back here, you've got a good amount of practicality. You've got these airline style sort of pockets here. You've got a big door pocket there. And these windows, unfortunately, do not have covers, but as you can see on this car, with a good amount of tinting, you can sort of reduce the amount of UV light that comes in. It might be a little bit dangerous for baby children. Now, the thing about the Velar is that everything back here feels very comfortable. Material quality, like in the front, is also very positive and all very, very plush, as you'd expect from a car at this price point. But more importantly, the way it drives and the way it treats passengers and drivers is truly unique. It is a truly Range Rover quality. Let me explain. Driving a Range Rover is always such a pleasure, and that certainly hasn't changed in the Velar. Now, the model that we're driving is the highest of the 3 trim levels available in Malaysia, and it also runs the P300 engine, which means you get 300 PS and about 400 Newton meters of torque, with power going to all 4 wheels via an 8-speed automatic gearbox. This is a relatively familiar recipe because you can also get the P300 engine in things like the Land Rover Defender as well as the Discovery Sport, although I believe that it was down-tuned in the Disco Sport. Same engine, but different output. Now, the reason why I say driving a Land Rover or a Range Rover is always a very pleasurable experience is because Range Rovers, no matter what, even in the Velar, have a very commanding driving position. So if you were to compare this to, say, a Porsche Macan or a Jaguar F-Pace, you'll find that those cars invite you to sit in the cockpit, whereas in a Range Rover, you kind of sit on it. So you have this lovely view out of the bonnet, you have this lovely view over kind of out of the side windows and so on, so it just makes you feel like you're sitting higher above the proletariat. Now, the thing about a Range Rover is that ultimately its commitment is towards comfort, even in a vehicle like the Velar, which Land Rover claims is their most driver-focused vehicle, although I highly doubt that. So when you're driving it sensibly, you will find that everything in the cabin is very muted. The engine remains very muted. You get very little in terms of wind and road noise despite those massive alloy wheels. And because this car has been profiled as aerodynamically as it has, it means that there's very few surfaces for wind to catch on that will create whistle within the cabin. This pays dividends both out on the open road as well as in town. Because this car is very well insulated overall, it means that whenever there is a motorbike passing you or a lorry on the motorway or something like that, the sound doesn't really kind of penetrate the cabin sort of unfiltered. The worst of those noises get sort of cut out, and so everything in here remains lovely and serene. And when you're on the motorway, again, everything remains the same because, like I said, this car is very aerodynamically efficient and the engine's relatively muted, so you can take in many, many, many motorway miles without concern. What aids to that, of course, is the fact that these 2 front seats, as I mentioned in the walk-around, that these are both ventilated and heated, and the 2 front seats also come with a massage function, which means, again, you can be sat here for hours with the car slowly kneading your back. And it is worth noting that compared to all the cars that I've ever reviewed in my entire lifetime, this has the best massage seats I've ever tried, which is a big plus for Range Rover, and I certainly hope that it permeates into other models. But the thing about the Velar is that it is deceptively fast, because if I put my foot down, you'll hear a little bit more of that engine, and you realize that actually it's got a rather pleasant growl to it, which is strange given the fact that they've deleted the rear exhaust exits, at least the visible ones at least. But despite that, it's got this lovely pleasant noise to it, which is always nice. But driving the Velar is pleasurable, it's comfortable, it's cushy. The very worst of the lumps and bumps get evened out. Everything just feels like it's been filtered to ensure that you have the very best, most serene experience behind the wheel. Now, while that pays dividends when you're munching motorway miles, just trying to get through the average sort of urban traffic jam, it does sort of take away a little should you get a little bit enthusiastic, because the Range Rover Velar is very clearly not designed for enthusiastic drivers. I say this because the standard fit air suspension, while it does a decent job at trying to maintain the mass of this car, when you go around corners a little bit too quickly, you can feel the weight begin to shift and the car begin to lean, which is not a great sensation when you're trying to cover ground, especially at higher speed. On top of that, the steering in this car is very light. No matter what mode you're in, the steering wheel remains very, very light, which means that when you're driving through traffic or trying to park, it's all very easy and comfortable and easy to negotiate. But again, when you're driving quickly, it doesn't quite lend the sort of confidence that you'd want out of a car like this. No doubt vehicles like the BMW X3 and the Jaguar F-Pace do better in this regard. But again, that is not the point of a Range Rover. A Range Rover is about a serene driving experience. And adding to that is this car's upgraded level of ADAS systems. So While this car still comes with sort of the same features that we saw from the Velar previously, things like adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring, lane keep assist, collision avoidance, rear cross traffic alert, and so on and so forth, in this model it's been ever so slightly refined. So now when the car detects an obstacle or a vehicle in front of you, it slows down a lot more gently, it accelerates a lot more gently. Everything in this car, progress in this car is just much smoother than before. Now what that means is when you're stuck in a traffic jam, as many Velar owners tend to, you can rely on these systems and allow the car to do the majority of the work, which takes away a lot of strain driving through urban traffic. And then of course, when you're on the motorway, the lane keep assist on this car is so adept that, again, all you have to do is sort of monitor the car, keep your hands on the wheel and be ready to take over at all times. But for the most part, you can rely on the car to do the majority of the work, which is always a nice thing to have. And add to that, as I mentioned earlier, this car's very serene cockpit experience, the massage seats, etc. It just creates a very nice, positive, pleasant place to be. This pleasantness is, to me, peerless, because compared to vehicles like the Mercedes-Benz GLC or GLC Coupe or the X3, the X4, they don't really quite come close to what the Range Rover Velar offers. The degree of serenity and isolation in this car is truly on another level, which is in keeping with this car's pricing, which is also on another level. To Land Rover's credit, there isn't really much you can do when your cars are fully imported, but to that end, Jaguar F-Pace is still ever so slightly cheaper. And you can get a Macan, usually certified pre-owned from Porsche, but you can get a Macan for slightly better pricing, slightly more competitive pricing than this. But Land Rover will tell you that Land Rover customers don't care, particularly when it comes to a Range Rover. This is very much a success statement. And when you look at this facelift as a whole, with its slightly updated interior, its updated exterior, everything has been done to reduce this car to what appears to be the very bare minimum. This car is an exercise in minimalism, including in terms of how it drives. And as far as I'm concerned, by minimizing the amount of intrusion in terms of noise and vibration, in terms of making every possible use and function in this car as easy as possible, this is in keeping with what a Range Rover is supposed to be, the penultimate luxury SUV. And even though the Velar is on the smaller end of the scale of Range Rover models that you can buy, it still has that Range Rover character, and I think that it is the better for it. Now again, if you want an SUV that is comfortable, serene, quiet, and truly the last word in luxury within the segment, then the Range Rover Velar is essentially peerless. But if you want a car that's slightly better to drive, then you may want to consider the Jaguar F-Pace, which I think does a much better job with this powertrain in terms of using it for performance or enthusiastic driving. Although if you want to go even more in that direction, then there is, of course, the Porsche Macan, which is an even sharper car to drive but comes with its own set of compromises, as one would expect. But if you want the last word in luxury, then this is it. The Range Rover Velar continues to be one of the very best vehicles in the segment, despite its rather heady price. And as far as I'm concerned, there isn't really that much to complain about. Of course not, it's a Range Rover. But that so concludes our review of the 2024 Range Rover Velar P250H. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to be notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the links are in the description below, and if you'd like to join our new WhatsApp channel, the link to that is also in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We will catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, and jangan bodoh.